In this lesson, we'll discuss a second goal in communicating the musical idea, which is to have a common written language that not only describes pitch patterns, but that also describes the duration, rhythm, and speed of those patterns. We'll begin with the concept of beat. Within every piece of music, there lives a pulse. When we listen to a piece of music, we're aware of this pulse even if we don't actually hear it. We feel it. We instinctively tap our feet to it. We call this pulse a beat. It is repetitive, evenly spaced, and persistent. As examples, let's listen to a few musical excerpts. We'll play each of them through once, giving no indication for time on the staff in order to allow you to feel the beat. Then, we'll play the example again, adding what is called a click track, so that you can hear the beat and compare it to what you felt. This first excerpt is from Ludwig van Beethoven's second movement from his Piano Sonata No. 2, written during the late 18th century. Now we'll repeat it, this time with the click track. This second excerpt, "The Girl with the Flaxen Hair," is a song by the French composer Claude Debussy, written during the late 19th or early 20th century. Be aware that due to some of the rhythmic techniques Debussy has used in writing this piece, determination of the beat pattern may be difficult. Now, once again with a click track. Finally, our third excerpt is an invention by Johann Sebastian Bach, written sometime during the late 17th or early 18th century. And again with the click track. You may have noticed from the foregoing that the beats living within the excerpts occur in what we perceive as groups of twos, threes, or fours. This is true of any and all musical works, and it is how we hear beat groupings, in twos, threes, or fours. We determine whether the group is a 2, 3, or 4 based on the pattern of strong and weak beats that are uniquely natural to each group. For example, when beats are grouped into sets of 2, the first beat is strong while the second beat is weak. This pattern of strong versus weak is persistent throughout the piece, at least until the composer intentionally changes the beat to a group of 3 or 4. A tone that coincides with a strong beat is subconsciously played with a little more emphasis than a tone that coincides with a weak beat. Listen to the previous excerpt from Beethoven's Sonata No. 2, where this emphasis has been purposely exaggerated. When played normally, this first beat is still emphasized, but not so overstatedly. When the beats are grouped in sets of 3, the first beat is strong, while the second and third are weak. Listen again to our excerpt from Debussy's Girl with the Flaxen Hair, where the emphasis has been exaggerated in order to show the strong weak-weak pattern of beats grouped in threes. When beats are grouped in sets of 4, the first beat is strong, the second beat weak, the third beat less strong, and the fourth beat weak. See if you can hear the difference between a group of 2 and a group of 4 when the group of 4 is exaggerated in our excerpt from Bach's Invention. By the way, the original was performed on a clavinet, which is limited to a single volume. For the purpose of demonstrating the exaggerated beat pattern, the excerpt is now played on a modern piano. Now we'll need to agree on some written symbols that will tell a musician, or group of musicians, whether the beat is to be counted in 2s, 3s, or 4s. The first symbol needs to give us a visual enclosure, a box if you will, into which we can place our beat groupings. We call such an enclosure a measure, and it is created by placing measure lines, also called bar lines, at evenly spaced intervals within the staff. This illustration shows how beats in groups of 2 would be arranged within each measure. We won't be concerned with the note values at this point. We'll simply agree that each note represents one beat. As discussed previously, the first of the 2 beats will receive a strong emphasis and the second a weaker emphasis. Many times there will be fewer notes within a measure, indicating that one or more beats have been combined into longer durations. Other times we will find many notes within the measure, indicating that the beats have been divided into shorter, quicker durations. It is for this reason that a time signature is placed within the first measure at the head of each staff. The top number of the time signature reminds the musician of the number of beats each measure will receive, even though the beats themselves may be divided. This next illustration indicates the arrangements of beats in groups of 3. As discussed previously, the first beat receives a strong emphasis, while the second and third beats receive weaker emphases. When there are 3 beats to a measure, the number 3 will appear at the top of the time signature within the first measure at the head of each staff. Finally, we indicate the arrangements of beats as they occur in groups of 4. We recall that the first beat receives the strongest emphasis, the second is weak, the third is emphasized but less strongly than the first, and the fourth beat weak. When measures contain 4 beats each, the number 4 will appear at the top of the time signature. Now, let's introduce the subject of, and symbols for, notes, note values, rests, and rest values. We'll start by stating that the most commonly used beat pattern is the group of 4. If we assume the measure to be a single whole unit, which takes a certain amount of time to pass by, and that this measure contains a total of 4 beats, then it follows that each beat must be equal in time to 1/4 of the measure. The symbols that we write onto a musical staff are called notes because they are visual reminders of the different pitches to be played and the amount of time each pitch should be allowed to continue. In this case, each note represents 1 beat. Since each beat is equal in time to 1/4 of the measure, we call the note a quarter note. Since each beat is equal to a quarter note, all subsequent combinations and divisions of the beat will be equal to combinations and divisions of the quarter note. With this in mind, we can talk about combining and dividing the beats. The symbol for a whole note appears as an oblong circle. A whole note is equal to 4 quarter notes and combines all 4 beats of the measure. A whole note, as played on the piano, would be struck on the first beat of the measure and allowed to continue through the remaining 3 beats of the measure. A rest is a symbol that tells the musician to be silent and refrain from playing for a specific amount of time. Like a whole note, a whole rest is equal to 4 quarter notes and combines all 4 beats of the measure. A whole rest tells the musician to remain silent beginning on the first beat and to continue that silence through the remainder of the measure. The symbol for a whole rest appears as a solid rectangle which hangs down from the staff line. The quarter rest is equal in time to the quarter note and lasts 1/4 of the measure. The symbol for a quarter rest appears as shown. The symbol for a half note appears as an oblong circle with a stem attached to it. The half note is equal to 2 quarter notes and is also equal to 1/2 the value of a whole note. A half note, as played on the piano, would be struck on the first beat of the measure and allowed to continue through the second beat. It would be struck again on the third beat and allowed to continue through the fourth beat. Like the half note, the half rest is equal to 2 quarter notes and tells the musician to remain silent beginning on the first beat and continue that silence through the second beat. The symbol for the half rest appears as a solid rectangle that sits above a staff line. Now let's talk about notes that divide the beat. 2/8 notes are equal to 1 quarter note and divide each beat into 2. The symbol for a solo eighth note appears like a quarter note that has a single flag attached to its stem. When eighth notes are grouped, they appear as quarter notes whose stems are joined by a single bar. An eighth note played on the piano would be struck twice equally for each beat. As an aid in timing, musicians often count eighth notes using the beat number followed by the word and. For example, 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. Like the eighth note, the eighth rest is equal to 1/2 of the quarter note. To hear the effect of an eighth rest, let's play on the piano a series of eighth rests falling on each beat, followed by an eighth note falling between each beat. The symbol for an eighth rest appears as a slanted line with a single head attached to its top. 16th notes divide each beat into 4. Thus, 1 quarter note is equal in value to 4 16th notes. By the same token, 1 eighth note is equal in value to 2 16th notes. 16th notes played on a piano would be struck equally 4 times for each beat. As an aid in timing, musicians often count 16th notes using the beat number followed by the words E and A. For example, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. There are several ways in which we can denote 16th notes. When grouped, they appear as quarter notes whose stems are joined by a double bar. Sometimes there will be an intervening 16th rest in the middle of a group. This leaves one 16th note solo, yet still connected to the group. In this case, the solo 16th note will remain connected to the group by a single bar, but a short disconnected bar will be placed just below the connecting bar to show the reader that this is indeed a 16th note. A single solo 16th note will appear as a quarter note that has a double flag attached to its stem. Like the 16th note, the 16th rest is equal to 1/4 of a quarter note, or 1/2 of an eighth note. To hear the effect of the 16th rest, we'll play, on the piano, a series of randomly spaced 16th notes and 16th rests. The 16th rest appears like the slanted stick pin described earlier, but has a double head attached to its top. Like the 16th note, there are several symbols which denote various configurations of 32nd and 64th notes. When grouped, they appear as quarter notes whose stems are joined by 3 bars for the 32nd note and 4 bars for the 64th note. In the case of a solo but connected note, the 32nd note remains connected by a single bar, but will have second and third short disconnected bars just below the connecting bar. The 64th note will be connected by a single bar and will have second, third, and fourth short disconnected bars just below the connecting bar. A completely solo 32nd or 64th note will appear as a quarter note that has a triple flag for the 32nd note and a quadruple flag for the 64th note. 32nd and 64th rests follow the pattern that we have previously described. This concludes Part 1 of our lesson on the communication of duration, rhythm, and speed of musical tones. In Part 2, our next lesson will continue to introduce those ideas and practices.